Hello, I'm Lola Roberts, and welcome to this week's episode of the Goal Difference podcast, where those two football mad twins talk about, well, football. But the catch is, I support Liverpool, and my lovely, beautiful, charming, level-headed co-host Scarlet Roberts support Arsenal. So I'm great, I'm fine, everything's great, I'm doing absolutely fine. And Scarlet is, how are you, Scarlet?
I'm good. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Goal Difference, Lola.
It's been a while between drinks for us on the Goal Difference here, but delighted to see your face. Don't see it nearly as often as I would like to. We should let our listeners know that, we have taken a bit of a break to coincide with the international break. I don't want to say there's been a touch of Noel and Liam going on behind the scenes, but, I'd like to ask you all, if there was a Noel and there was a Liam, who would they be?
I can't help but feel that the AWS outage had something to do with Liverpool fans just not wanting to talk about football.
Well, everybody has to have their coping mechanisms, and my coping mechanism when things are not going well is to pretend that football doesn't exist and that I've never heard of football.
Well, the Grim Reaper is here for you, and you cannot slip the noose any longer.
And just like it's been a while since we last did a Goal Difference episode, up until last night, it had been quite a while since Liverpool Football Club had last won a game, because the women's team certainly aren't winning any matches. For once, the men's team were following suit. And I think by my maths, the last time we'd won a football match was that midweek game against Southampton in the Carabao Cup, when all the good juju ran out and Atletico did the messy celebration for scoring the winner against Southampton at home in the opening rounds of the Carabao Cup. But here we sit, and Liverpool have won, and I bumped into a friend today and said I hadn't realised how much it was affecting my mood. Because, let me be really honest with you, Scarlett, everything is worse when your team isn't winning. But of course, you don't know much about that right now, because wins must feel 10 a penny to you.
Yeah, I think the momentum is there for Arsenal that wasn't last season, and it feels nice. It feels like the world is put to right.
Right, on today's show, we're going to discuss Arsenal's victory in the Haramble terrorism derby, the counter-terror derby, which left Atleti in hot water, so to speak. We'll check in on the title race and do a health check on our respective teams and have a good old look ahead to the weekend fixtures. So, Scarlett, let's start with you. You were at the Emirates on Tuesday night. The big question is, was there any hot water?
I just actually want to clear this up live on air, because in the Goal Difference channels, I received communications from you along the lines of, "That's disgraceful," immediately assuming that, it was some kind of deliberate mind game tactic to put Atleti off. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure it's a big enough game to do that in. But anyway, the hot water was actually fixed by the time Atleti were due to finish training, but they'd already gone. They were so angry they'd already left.
Well, I would be. Professional football team, the least you expect is hot water. And I remember going back years when we were wide-eyed, innocent young children on the tour of the Emirates, and they took us into the dressing rooms. And I couldn't believe how horrible the away dressing room was compared to the state-of-the-art, beautiful home dressing room. So really, I would expect more class from Arsenal Football Club.
There are quite a lot of parallels between you and Diego Simeone.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
No, I need not. Anyway, I'll talk about the game, shall I?
Go on then, fire away.
So, yeah, I think my headlines on it were that it actually could have been quite different. Like, I don't think scorelines have flattered us recently. In fact, I know we've underperformed our XG. But in this, it kind of felt like a pretty even contest that Arsenal deserved to win, that then, once Atleti had been broken, they just capitulated in a very un-Atleti-like way. Kind of featured moments would be Gyökeres breaking his mini drought, which everyone's obsessed with. I heard a really funny passage on Arsecast talking about, I didn't know this was a thing, but maybe it's because of my young, innocent days, how goals were once scored by the penis of William Gallas, and they suggested that this goal was scored by the cock of York.
I mean, I don't even want to
The whole thing where they say it's just got to go in off your ass. Well, it went in off something else. So it was good to see him back to his vibrant best, celebrating. I mean, actually, I say back to his best. I think he's been pretty good throughout this spell, just a little bit snatching or hesitant in front of goal. So there were two bumpy set pieces, non-goals, if you want to call them that. And then there was a Lewis Skelly run from deep. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen it?
No, no. I don't make it my business to watch Arsenal highlights when you win. I can hear enough from my living room.
So he picked the ball up, inside, deep inside Arsenal territory and literally took out, I mean, four Madrid players, ran straight through their team. And that is not anything new when it comes to Miles. I sort of thought he'd get bundled over, potentially have a shot himself, but he slipped it to Martinelli, who just absolutely whipped it past Oblak. And, Oblak is kind of in the Donnarumma school of giant. It's not easy to beat him. So that was just nice to see Martinelli. He did his shark celebration where he goes like that. He seemed fired up. The only kind of negative is too strong a word, but I think Eze is having a difficult time negotiating the level of responsibility that Odegaard has in that position. And then I think the biggest tell from that game about where Arsenal are is that once they went ahead, they never looked like conceding. Despite, a couple of moments going for Atleti in the first half, they had a weird open goal where David Raya got caught in no man's land. And then Alvarez, who looked class, turned, had just a tiny bit of space and curled it onto the bar. But after we went a goal up, that was it. And, that's not very Atleti, and it's not very historically Arsenal. We just closed it down and we broke them. And I think that control is it's now the exact opposite to what happened to Liverpool in that game, who raced into a 2-goal lead, deserved it, but then really struggled to stay on top of that game.
With the Atleti team, I just wanted to drill down into you mentioning it's kind of not quite the Atleti side of old. And it's interesting because, as I found out on the transfer flow this summer, plug that podcast. We love that podcast. They recruited very differently and signed a lot of attacking players, and they got off to a slightly inauspicious start in the Liga. And the big questions were, has Simeone signed players that he simply doesn't know what to do with? And I thought that was the really interesting thing about playing them at Anfield was, Llorente aside, who clearly has like a magical Liverpool thing. His dog's called Anfield, by the way. They weren't the Atleti of old at all. They were easy on the eye, technically quality. But my biggest observation from that was, whoa, these are not hard to play against. They're not hard to break down. And I think after the game, I was really pissed off about the way we threw away a 2-goal lead in that game. And after the game, Ted Knutson of the transfer flow shared the XG. That's as close to a pasting as you're going to get. And, you can dive into the control versus chaos thing. And you certainly have a point because Arsenal are control epitomized. But I think what's interesting about Liverpool is when your luck is against you, like we outperformed Man United on the XG on the weekend.
Yeah, but also you have to take into account that you were chasing the game for a lot of that, which naturally produces a higher XG.
But also Scarlet form and control are inseparable from each other. So I don't think Liverpool are. We maybe are set up to be more expansive this season, and that's an active decision that Slot has taken because of the signings. But what I think is really interesting is both of us have had a similar experience with playing Atletico and being disappointed is the wrong word, but surprised at the type of team they've turned out to be. Still lots of rolling around on the floor, of course, and appealing for every decision. But they're easy on the eye. They play nice football. They're clever, but they're not, they're not nasty haramble Simeone.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a haramble game. It didn't live up to its billing in that way. I did think it was late stage Simeone, I think. It feels like they've evolved in a really weird direction. Like the fact that Sorloth started up front, who's, kind of a lump, but compare him
really well, in fairness.
But compare him to the lumps that they've had up there in the past. Compare him to Diego Costa and it's no comparison. So the logic of playing him made sense to have an outball, blah, 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 all the reasons why you play a big striker. But it seemed odd to me in the same way that you thought it seemed odd that they signed these slightly smaller technical players that you realise you need some physical dominance, but you don't have the best player for that.
Okay, Scarlett, I think that is just about enough of you reveling in your victory. There's been far too much of that lately. But, another very convincing performance from Arsenal, who at the moment are answering all the questions. I'm going to come back to my usual niggle with Arsenal, which is it was the set pieces again. And I just want to ask you as we finish this section, Jova is obviously the best that there is when it comes to creating dangerous set piece situations. But is a team eventually gonna find a way to stop it? Because I just felt that at Anfield you didn't threaten from set pieces, and then it looked like the players were like, "Oh shit, we haven't opened the game our usual way. What do we do?" Is there any of that going on?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you hit a kind of rich vein of something, you always worry about when the abundance fades away. But I think the truth is the set pieces are just a function of A, Arsenal's dominance, and B, their constant striving to kind of maximize all forms of the game to yield the best results. And the fact is, when you are Arsenal or Liverpool, as Slot has identified, and you often come up against teams who defend stubbornly in a low block, you produce a lot of set pieces, which means the likelihood of you scoring from a set piece is higher. And in terms of Arsenal, generally in Arsenal this season, I think the whole only creating from set pieces narrative really comes from last season when we had loads of our creative players out and essentially were scoring goals by creating set pieces in open play and from set pieces. And in this particular game, yes, the game was broken open by a set piece against Fulham. We scored a set piece, but that doesn't really tell the whole story of the game where we were massively dominant and created chances that, Arsenal of old don't create. So the overall answer to what you're saying is no, I'm not concerned, but I understand why you're asking the question.
Okay, that's section one drawn to a close. Is there anything you'd like to ask me about, Scarlett?
Well, I did put out a quick call on Monday when we weren't able to convene for the podcast because I was just feeling so bereft of football conversation in the absence of being able to ask you about Liverpool post weekend. And I wanted to share with you a question from a listener because I think it's relevant to the Frankfurt game. And then you can talk a little bit about how that worked and then the Frankfurt game more generally. At Mulatto and Albino, sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly, on Blue Sky, asked about Ekatike and Isak and basically, should they play together? Where should they play together? How should they play together? And how did you think that worked last night?
Well, I think the answer about those two revolves around one man who isn't either of those two, and that is Mohamed Salah. Because as long as the attack is built around Salah, I don't think it works to play both of them because at the end of the day, you're shunting one of them out of position. So you're shunting one of them out to the left, which clearly Ekatike can do and Isak has done, but you're not having them in the areas where you really want to have them. So the conversation is really, should Liverpool drop Mo Salah? And it's so difficult. I've had a lot of conversations with Liverpool fans and non-Liverpool fans about whether Salah should be dropped. And I know that last night, he comes on the 70th minute and has a couple of chances. There's one he really should square to Wirtz, and apparently his demeanour wasn't great after the game.
Apparently, he went straight down the tunnel. Apparently,
That
he
wasn't
went straight
true.
down the
That
tunnel.
wasn't true. There's pictures of him acknowledging the fans. That journalist either got it wrong or lied.
Liverpool. The press are out to get Liverpool.
The Liverpool journal, Lewis Steele, and normally pretty good, but I don't know. I think, and then Salah responded quite pettily by removing Liverpool from his bio on Twitter. I mean, I hate it when players do that. I think it's really petulant. But I think with Salah, we've talked about him not looking like he's enjoying his football. It's almost the opposite with Hugo Ekitike. Everything he touches is working right now, even in a Liverpool side that isn't fully functioning. Over the international break for France, he was linking up beautifully with Mbappe. He's just full of confidence. So for me, he has to play. And then with the Salah thing, the best version of Mo Salah is a version of Mo Salah with a point to prove. I've never seen him just be brilliant just because this is a man that is fueled by people doubting him. So if you were asking me about this weekend, in a weird way, I would be saying, I don't think you make your point by benching him for Frankfurt. I don't think, he could easily have just been rotated for that game. I think it would be seriously making a point to bench him against Brentford and start the two of Ekitike and Isak, because then you'd be saying you have lost your place and you need to win it back. Long term, we are going to play with the front two because long term, Mo Salah isn't going to be around. In the short term, I can't really answer that. And Isak is a doubt anyway for the weekend with a groin problem. So it's unlikely that we're going to see that. It was good from what I saw last night. It was good, but Isak's still struggling. Isak needs a goal. He had two brilliant chances, which he actually did the initial part really well, and then the finish was straight at the keeper. So there's a long way to go before it feels like the system is optimal for all the players. I think my answer to that question is I don't know about Ekitike and Isak. I don't know about Mo Salah, but the one that must play is Hugo Ekitike as the centre forward.
Okay, one last question about the Frankfurt game and the ramifications, and then we'll move on. Can I tell you what it looks like from the outside to
Go
give
ahead.
some
Yeah.
Arsenal colour? So you've obviously brought these new players with a new system in mind. There's the kind of new Liverpool, which has Alexander Isak in it and Florian Wirtz and Ekitike to some extent. Um, and then you have the old title winning Liverpool who played a certain way, played slightly deeper, you know, from my limited tactical knowledge, basically created loads of mini transitions, which meant that their forwards had a lot of space to run into. From my side, like I would just play the players who are working, whose tails are up. You know, you talk about people playing with a smile on their face, and obviously McAllister's struggling as well. So the midfield has a lot of question marks over it. But say you play Curtis Jones, you play Soberslai, and you play Gravenberg, and then you play Gakpo, who's having a decent season, Ekitike and Salah, and you have a midfield that basically functions. You don't have this kind of number 10 player where you're not really sure how to integrate him. I mean, obviously the issue there is that you've lost a massive part of how you used to play, and like that ball from Trent to Salah is gone. So maybe it's a moot point. But I guess I'm like, you know, I think from the outside it feels like Slot is caught between sticking to his guns and trying to like grow this system that he wanted to start at the beginning of the season and thinking, oh God, I've got to revert back to what worked last season. And he's kind of somewhere in the middle.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. In the Liverpool camp, what I'd be saying is until you can sort out exactly how you want to set up in the long term, then just play the people that are feeling good. And for me, that is those names that you just mentioned. So it's Curtis Jones, Dominic Szoboszlai, Hugo Ekitike, Cody Gakpo, um, and Ryan Gravenberch. Yeah, because you know at the moment Szoboszlai and Gravenberch have probably been our players of the season, but I think you know I'd include Florian Wirtz in that group. He would have walked off the pitch last night feeling a hell of a lot better about himself. And it's interesting. He did all the same things he usually does last night. It just happened that, you know, two of the chances he created actually got finished. But then I noticed another level to his game that I haven't seen yet, where all of a sudden after the second assist, there are back heels flying out everywhere. He's nicking the ball around the corner. And I don't think that was just about confidence. I think drifting over to the right-hand side rather than the left-hand side actually was helpful to him. You know, you'd think with a guy like Florian Wirtz, who's so diminutive, that cutting inside would be his best route to creating chances. But he did really well on the outside and linked up quite well with Conor Bradley. So I would be doing exactly as you said, sticking with the guys that are feeling good, that are enjoying their football. So for me, that would actually be a midfield two of Jones and Szoboszlai. Szoboszlai, interestingly, his long passing in the right quadrant of the pitch was very Trent-esque. No one is going to be Trent when it
Yeah,
comes
because
to,
he's a midfielder.
yeah.
So he's got that range of passing.
But that was a dynamic I liked. Curtis Jones deserves to start football matches for Liverpool. I think it's you do a disservice to Curtis Jones when you bring him on when you're chasing a game because he has so much energy and you know, he's in these situations where sometimes chances fall to him and it's like you don't actually necessarily want it to fall to him, but the damage has already been done and then blame gets laid at his door and people can be very critical of him. But I want to see him from the start because I think he can help us control football matches. So yeah, it's that group of guys that you mentioned, and Florian Wirtz for me, and the person who would miss out, um, if everybody was fully fit on the weekend, and I'm including Isak in that, although I think he probably will be at best on the bench. The person you'd be missing out currently for me is Mo Salah, purely because I think giving Salah a point to prove is the best way to get back the Mo Salah that we all want to see.
Yeah, and I mean, just to wrap up on that, like, I think one of the most interesting, and this is spoiler alert, this isn't the thing that I found most surprising. But one of the most interesting ways Arsenal's squad has improved across the board is by being able to take people out of the firing line. I think for so long Martinelli has had to go up there and run into brick walls and worked bloody hard for the team defensively, but has had very low confidence. He's come out of the team, he's been able to be introduced in game states that suit his game more, late on, tired legs, etc. He scored some goals, and you can just tell his confidence is up. And you, but there's no world in which there is an equivalence between Mo Salah and Martinelli. Like, I'm not saying I think there is a really big argument for just saying you stick with Salah because he's the best player in the world, or one of, um, because he has that quality that means that even if he's not playing well, something amazing might happen. But I have seen, and I think it's a new dimension to Arsenal, the benefits of being able to take someone out and put someone else in who can keep you at that level and keep you going. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Mo Salah, he's proven all through his career that being written off is actually and I'm not writing Mo Salah off. I don't want him to be dropped because I don't think he's a good player anymore or because he's washed or whatever. Like, we've had this conversation before, but I think he needs a reset, and he needs the bit between his teeth, and he's had the new contract, and his performances actually going back to about March, April time last year have not been at the level that he was previously in the season. And, you know, prior to that, he was playing angry. He was playing with a point to prove about getting the contract. So I think the best Mo Salah is a Mo Salah, a Mo Salah proving the doubters wrong. And I think he will, and I think he can.
right. Thank you for that. I now really belatedly have to put you to the sword for something. And we're going to do this with a reprise of a segment that we've previously tried out called Family Feuds. Because let's be honest, Lola, despite some glamour in there, lots of goals, the Champions League midweek, you could even say it was merely a distraction or a palate cleanser. Obviously, the big pressure is on the Premier League. And it was a big weekend last weekend, and I haven't had the chance to talk to you about it. So I have to ask you, what happened to Dad's chest of drawers?
Well, there's 3 game weeks in a row that Liverpool have lost and Arsenal have won. So, is it even news anymore when it happens in the Premier League? But I don't think I was angry in that run before the international break. Disappointed, definitely, but not angry, because it was very easy to see in each of those games the fine margins that led to the outcomes being the way they were. There was a lot of luck. There was a lot of travel. There was a lot of just shitty games that you don't really want to be playing, like when you're not feeling good, like Galatasaray away, Palace away, Chelsea away. So I was really willing to just be like, right, international break, clean break, we come back, it's a reset. So I was desperately, desperately disappointed and frustrated on the weekend. I was desperately disappointed that we went a goal down again, because I was thinking, doesn't matter if it's 0-0 in the 70th minute, you can go and win it, but don't be chasing the game. Um, and then to get back into the game when we'd been thundering at the door, desperately, desperately trying to knock that door down, to get back into the game and then to squander that opportunity to get back into the game and to go on and win the game was incredibly, incredibly
So,
frustrating.
so that's when it happened.
Yes, yes, that is when the TV remote went flying, because I'm a TV red, I'm an armchair red. Let's get the jibes in before someone else can say it. The TV remote went flying. What I thought was that I didn't process it too much, but I thought that the TV remote would break and that the dresser, being made of wood, would remain stoic and stable and well made. Unfortunately, the reverse happened and the dresser was chipped while the TV remote remained entirely functional. Okay, Scarlett, let's leave the listeners to their adjudications on that. And let's wrap things up by looking ahead to the weekend. Liverpool, the late kickoff at the G-Tech on Saturday. And you've got Palace at home at 2 p.m. on the Sunday. What are your thoughts and expectations? I'm assuming you're expecting 3 points.
Well, what kind of title contender would you be if you didn't expect to beat Palace? I know it will be a hard game, as you've experienced. I'm quite glad that their resolve has been broken on their unbeaten streak.
How annoying
Um,
thing they were doing, where they were being like, "Don't worry, we've updated the bio."
oh, I don't care. Like, this is the problem with me and like online. Like people are getting so angry about the Jamie O'Hara thing he said about Arteta ruining football. And I'm just like, I don't care. Like it's just so stupid. So sorry, I don't think that's that
Well,
annoying.
no.
I just think it's
And I was actually,
handbag.
like, mildly glad that, Everton
Yeah.
stopped that and then did
I
their
remember you said. But yeah, no, just quickly on Palace. Oddly, they apparently got racked up 4.25 XG against Bournemouth, which is, strange when you think about how good Bournemouth are, and they scored 3. So they're not gonna go down easily at the Emirates. I think this one again falls into that Fulham and Newcastle category where we have a very clear task, and that's to do better than we did in these fixtures last season, and to not allow these banana skins to be kind of damp squib banana skins. Go and take care of business however you need to. And I think if we play, to the levels we're capable of, we will win. So that's my hope. That's my expectation. How about you, Lola? What are you thinking about Brentford? I think from my perspective, City won there, unfortunately, but there's a little bit more about them under Keith Andrews, maybe, than we all thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing much has changed for me with Brentford. They were a tricky proposition under Thomas Frank, and they remain a tricky proposition under Keith Andrews. I think going into it and worrying about what they're gonna do would be the wrong approach, because we know that they're gonna do the long throw ins and that Keith Andrews will have clever ideas of how to attack us there. I think our conversation earlier about playing the people that are in form forces the hand of the manager. Don't go and set up for what you think Brentford are gonna do. Go and play our players that are in form and that, on paper are better players than Brentford, and just go and win the football match. So, you know, I'm sure Brentford will cause us trouble, just as they've caused lots of top teams trouble. I can't say I'm massively looking forward to it, but I'm feeling a hell of a lot better about it than I was 24 hours ago. Um, yeah, I just would like to go and see Liverpool back themselves and be like, right, it might not be perfect, it might not be tidy, but we've got better players than you, and we can come out of this situation with a win. So, again, it all goes back to playing the guys that are enjoying it, and are in form.
Okay.
But I am expecting Palace to be difficult at the Emirates. They are difficult, and they have some very good players, and Glasner is a massive twat, but a very, very good manager.
Think he's a twat? Why do you think he's a twat?
'Cause he threatened to commit suicide if they sold him to Kate.
That's not true.
Right, to round off today, Scarlett, we're gonna talk about one thing that surprised us. So why don't you lead with that? What's one thing that surprised you this week?
One thing that surprised me, which didn't surprise friend of the podcast, Jake, our brother, because he doesn't know ball, and I'm saying that in writing on air.
Jake Katz
Um,
Roberts, presenter of Quest Radio every Thursday afternoon between 4 and 5.
that very same Jake Katz-Roberts, because I pointed out to him the thing that surprised me, which is that Miles Lewis-Skelly, not his socks weren't at a normal height. They were actually above his knee, which is surprising because, you know, conjure the image of Miles Lewis-Skelly in your head. Um, you know, normally the socks are kind of just below calf level. He's clearly a devotee of the kind of low sock baller trait or whatever. I probably said like Gen Z language in the wrong order. But anyway, I think it looked kind of weird. It was weird to see him with high socks, but he was still doing the same Miles Lewis-Skelly stuff. So it surprised me to see that.
Very good, Scarlett. Well, I think mine would have been the feeling of certainty and calm that I had when Hugo Ekitike went through on goal for the equaliser. We had had chances to equalise before that. Curtis Jones had a header, and I think there was another dangerous situation. And especially when you factor in the Man United game where we conspired to miss very presentable opportunities. And if you factor in the history of Darwin Núñez, who, if he had that opportunity, I wouldn't even bother standing up from my seat. Um, I felt absolute confidence that Ekitike would score, and I think that is a sign of a not only a striker in form, but a very, very good finisher. So long may that continue, and thank you, Hugo Ekitike, for bringing small spots of joy in what has otherwise been a grim period.
I tell you what, I had the same feeling actually when I saw him go through. Like, no doubts about that being a goal.
I don't know if it was just going back to Frankfurt, he felt super he did actually say that he was like, "Well, of course I'd score," because that is the place where he most kind of mentally associates himself with playing well. But Frankfurt, weird team. Do you have them in the rest of the group stage?
I don't think so. I mean, I thought they were rubbish.
They were dangerous going forward. They've scored plenty of goals.
Everyone's dangerous going forward against Liverpool.
Zing. Um, they are responsible for single-handedly responsible. Well, no, that's not possible. They are partially responsible for the Bundesliga having the highest XG of any league in Europe because their XG conceded is so high and their attacking XG is so high. So very, very funny old football team, but great fans. They did their kind of version of You'll Never Walk Alone. Um, and the black and white scarves and the flags, very atmospheric. They did it very well. Right. That is all we've got time for today. I've got to go to the premiere of the new Kenny Dalglish film. Scarlett, I believe you've got to go and deal with your beef shin ragu.
Yeah, I'm quite nervous about it.
I think it's burning. Okay, listeners, thank you very much for listening. Please do subscribe, review, comment, send us messages. We really appreciate your support. We are back. Please give us any feedback if you're so inclined. And thank you so much for listening. And we will see you again next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.